This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Jacob Baadsgaard. Jacob, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Hey, excited to be here.
So tell our audience a little bit about Jacob Baadsgaard.
Well, I interesting background. I grew up, I've got 10 siblings in my family, grew up in Utah.
Yeah.
And, I currently run a business that's called Disruptive Advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And people come to us to help them advertise on Google and Facebook primarily, is what we help businesses with. And we've been doing this for about 5 years. In the agency, we've got about 120 people here now, and we've been growing pretty quickly because of the unique approach we take. So it's been a lot of fun and pretty stressful as well.
I can't even imagine. So you went from, did you start this as a kind of a one-man shop?
That's correct.
And you went from 1 to 120 in 5 years?
Yep.
And as I think I saw somewhere, either on Facebook or maybe the website, it said we're hiring. Maybe it was on LinkedIn. So are you in a constant state of hiring?
Yeah. We'll probably in 2019, we'll hire another 40 to 50 people. And yeah, it's grown pretty quickly. I never thought we would need a HR leader in the company and a recruiter. And those are the two things that we're currently looking to bring in because we've been winging it so far. And in terms of recruiting and hiring and doing all that. And so that's one of the things that we're focused on right now.
It's easier to wear all the hats when there's 1 or 2 people in the company than it is when there's 20, I'm sure.
Yes.
So that you mentioning that kind of sparked something in my mind. A little bit maybe is in your bio. You talked about this idea of instead of hiring somebody to higher salary, maybe hire somebody at a lower salary and develop them into that leader. Can you touch on that just a little bit? Because you mentioned kind of your HR process and the fact that you're hiring all the time, constantly hiring people, and you're in this kind of exponential growth period. So touch on that a little bit.
Well, the needs change in the maturity cycle of any business.
Mm-hmm.
And any scalable business model cannot rely on just finding a bunch of experienced and talented people that are magically going to be at the right price point.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the things that I found was that integrating senior members at higher costs in the organization proved to be pretty difficult, and
Mm-hmm.
B, the payback period and break-even period was usually pretty challenging and pretty extended. And so we've tried to find the right balance of how many more junior to mid-level resources can we bring on to senior or even leader type roles that we bring on. And we found a lot of success with most of our hires being more in that junior and or maybe mid-level, mm-hmm. and creating a really good plan for them to grow and develop here. And so some of the things that we've done to facilitate that is I regularly speak and or teach classes at the local universities. And we have a pretty large internship program, mm-hmm. and we really just screen through and find the people that have the attributes that we're looking for. And then we've got a very specific and clear career path for people when they come here. And when we do our company surveys or manager surveys, of course, we always get mixed feedback of things that people love and things they'd like to see improve. And regularly, one of the top highlights that most people bring up is, I love that I know exactly what I need to do to grow, progress, and become the professional and develop the skills that I'm looking for while I'm here. And because that career path has been backed up with myself and my finance leaders to align that with the cost structure of the organization, people know, okay, this is what I do. And when I do that, that's how I make more money, grow in position and title. And I know that the company's winning at the same time because it's all been reverse engineered to align with profitability and cost structure of the organization.
So I know you're going to probably answer this in a self-deprecating, humble manner, but how many companies actually take that approach in hiring? Because that to me sounds like that is extremely strategic in hiring and developing talent. And not only that, I mean, as you were talking, the two things that also came to mind was you also can build in company culture into them from the beginning. They're not bringing a lot of, for lack of a better term, the pejorative term of baggage, to the table. But you can also, really see them through the development. And I would think your retention level will be much higher because of the things you're putting in place. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but those are just some thoughts that came to mind as you're kind of outlining your business approach. So, I mean, it seems like very few companies are really that strategic about this.
Well, I think that you're correct when you think more of the small business, right? And like I mentioned earlier, it is really difficult to scale a business from a talent standpoint if you don't have a good recruiting, hiring,
Right.
onboarding, and progression plan for new people. And so I think you're right, depending on the size of, now, if you look at really large companies, they have to do it this way. And so that's what they actually do very regularly. I would also say that there are trade-offs. When you get people right out of school and or younger in their career, sometimes they don't even know when they've got a good thing going.
Oh,
some of the best people that we've
yeah, for sure.
Some of the people that we've
Johnny.
got here, yes. And so that's one of the challenges that as we look for the right cultural fit in the organization, to kind of work around that as well, because people that have had a bad job or two, where they didn't feel like they could grow and progress, where they didn't feel like they were appreciated, come here and they're like, I'm never leaving. This is fantastic. This is so great, right? And so that's why we really do try to balance that in terms of the number of people that are coming through the internship program and coming in as junior resources in the company. That would probably be about where 40 to 50% of our hiring and development is occurring. Then about the other 30 to 40% is happening from people that are in that 3 to 5 years of experience in their career.
Right.
And that less than 10% are the senior people that we need for specific functions that have experience in the ways that we need it.
Right.
And that's kind of our balance that we've found is that's the right mix for us. And that way we're not oversaturating with inexperienced talent. We're getting a lot of people kind of right in that sweet spot as well. And then most of our leaders and managers are developed from within.
Right. Right.
But, when we need to hire an HR person, for example, that's a little trickier to just, change someone's hat that doesn't have experience doing that internally. So, those are where some of the other ones come from.
And if, every now and then, if you're bringing in a senior person, I mean, there's also kind of a deepening of the proverbial gene pool, that they can bring some things. I mean, it's not all kind of, internal, just like-minded, thinking that is happening because you've developed all of your talent internally. So sometimes there's this external, input that you can receive from bringing people in the process too.
And sometimes that's just refreshing, because I think you're right. You can kind of start to get groupthink and people not challenging as much. Now, that does happen. I have a lot of opinionated people here, so it hasn't been too much of an issue. But absolutely, that's something that I think is healthy for, I think it's really important for culture to see progression and promotions happening internally. And I think it's also important for culture to bring in different, still in alignment, but different ways of thinking and different perspectives. For sure.
Now, earlier or in 2018, I interviewed one of your kind of mid-level managers, Chris Daly, and great interview. And he's maybe an example of somebody you brought in like at the 3 to 5 year stage or something like that out of college. So does that kind of fit the mold that you're looking at? Yeah,
Chris is actually, he's a senior member of the team and one of the leaders in the company. So I would say he was one of the few people that we brought on as kind of a heavy hitter, experienced leader in the company.
Yeah.
And fortunately, that one worked out great.
Yeah, he's very sharp and was very amicable on the interview. So I enjoyed the time we got to spend together and just learn a little bit about disruptive advertising. And now I'm going to get a little different perspective because we're talking to the CEO. Yeah. So unpack a little bit. Just talk about your company and maybe where your sweet spot is. You have specific industries that you focus on.
Yeah. Well, before I started Disruptive, my background was actually in implementing web analytics and reporting for large, Fortune 100 type companies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually had no marketing background. My degree was actually in information systems.
Okay.
And if you had ever asked me during my degree or for the first few years of my career that I would end up running a marketing agency at some point, I hadn't even thought about that as an option, which is interesting, right? The way that I got introduced, and this will kind of help lay the groundwork for what it is that we do, is it was all data first. Let's track everything that's going on with your paid marketing online, with your organic, with your social, with everything. Let's get good attribution in place so we can kind of see everything that's going on. And then let's let the data start making a lot of those marketing decisions for us, right? Rather than gut feel or aesthetics or, brand and chalking. We don't actually need results. We'll just chalk it up to branding, which is usually what people say when they don't have a good measurement strategy in place.
Exactly.
So that's where I got my background. And then it just kind of naturally floated into, and now that we have good data, oftentimes the organizations that I was working with either didn't have the bandwidth internally or the expertise to act on that data.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's where disruptive advertising was born, that's the gap in the market, that we can help companies get great data first. And then we're not going to help them with all of it, but the areas that we can more specifically help them make good decisions with is advertising online, because we can track it very well. We can tie it all together, and we can use data to make that happen. My first client as an independent, it was phenomenal. They went from like 25 to 350 employees, and we just blew them up. I just blew them up, and it was like addicting and one of the funnest and challenging things that I was ever a part of. And that's what made me say, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm going to help companies get good data, and then we're going to help them execute on the social media and search and these other paid channels online to use that data to make great decisions and help grow the business. And so, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, so many of our interviews, we kind of touch on this idea of nothing's wasted. Nothing in past experience, past history leading up to kind of this aha moment that you have, is nothing's wasted. But it seems like to me that the jobs that you were tasked with in these Fortune 100 companies were not only identifying the gap, but they were also, you were also learning how to use the data that you would find. And because, you almost had to be self-taught, because this is such a burgeoning industry, in the last 5 or 10 years. And it's you don't go to university and get a degree in digital marketing 10 years ago.
Correct. And especially within the niche of web analytics within digital marketing. Exactly.
Right? So touch on that just a little bit about the kind of the whole idea of how you made that transition. Was it did you start side hustling at night while you still had your day job with non-competing clients, or how did you make that transition?
And so the first couple that I worked with, I actually just did some pro bono work for, and they were too small to actually engage with the company that I was working at. So I actually got permission from my manager to get them set up with some of the software and to help them out as kind of a sandbox for me to learn and
Sure.
Figure some of these things out. And then ultimately, it didn't compete because they were more of a software solution that we did consulting and implementation for. And then the actual acting on the data and running some of the marketing stuff was not a non-competing function.
Right.
And so, kind of got things going on the side. Some of it was just pro bono, helping people out, figuring things out myself. I was interested. Add some value first, right? I'm a big believer in give value, and then value always comes back usually, and then some.
Yep.
And that's when I made that transition was, hey, saw the opportunity. I saw that I was part of a large organization. At this point, it was Adobe. It had acquired the company that I was a part of. And I realized that my path to progression was not something that aligned with my goals, my professional goals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's ultimately why I broke off and got that going. And so, seeded the company. I remember writing a check for $50,000 and not taking a salary for the first little while, and signing on an office lease that scared me to death. I'm going to have to pay this when this doesn't work out, and this is going to suck real bad. But
hey, you burned the boats, right?
Yeah, but burn the ships. There's no going back. And so it was.
Find a lease.
It was good. Yeah.
I
And
don't
so
even have a
my wife
website or a
was,
company name. I just signed the lease.
it was crazy. And fortunately I had a supportive wife. I'm actually fairly conservative financially. So we had enough saved up in addition to, okay, this doesn't have to work.
Yeah.
But I really want it to. And I'm a big believer, and it's really important to be hungry, but not starving. Because if you're hungry, good things happen. You work hard. If
Yep.
you're starving, people actually will make ethically compromised
Oh,
decisions,
no question. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Act
so
out
I'm a
of
big believer.
desperation.
Yes, just stay hungry, don't stay starving. And so that's how we got things going. And again, we kept it simple. Companies came to us. Oftentimes it was just referrals early on. Now we're at the point where 500 plus businesses reach out to us a month
Wow.
to see if we can help them with their business. Most of them are too small or not the right fit for us.
Mm-hmm.
Our sweet spot, we've got enterprise companies that spend millions of dollars a month in ad budgets. And we work with small businesses and home services or healthcare that are spending like $1,000 a month in ad buys between Google and Facebook and those kind of things.
Yeah.
The types of businesses that we like to work with, we know work well, that we can drive results for, and that they're looking to grow, not just for a plug and play and just maintain. We want growth minded. And the average client that comes to us is typically spending about anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000 a month between Google and Facebook. And they're not quite getting the results that they're looking for. It's someone with multiple hats that's managing it for them, and or an agency that it's just not working out. They come to us, and the ones that we want to work with, they want to grow as a business. And we say, okay, yeah, maybe we're starting at 5 or 50,000. Our plan to get you to this level of growth, and here's how we're going to do it over the next 12 to 18 months. And so oftentimes our clients within 12 to 18 months are spending 2, 3, 4 times what they were when they started with us. And the return that they're getting is typically several multiples higher with that as well. And so we've created some growth and opportunity for them.
And really easy to measure. I mean, it's from a metric standpoint, it's easy to measure. Am I progressing or am I going backwards? So, I mean, it's not this ethereal, well, we're going to try it. We kind of feel like this is working. We see it. We're seeing a little uptick in likes on Facebook, that type of thing. So, I mean, you really are driven.
Ours is a very performance-driven marketing. We measure everything that we can measure. We work to ensure that it is achieving the ROI that is needed to justify the spend and our cost, so that we're seen as an investment, not a cost, right?
Right.
And there is benefit that we can't track, right? Because a lot of people saw the ads that didn't click on them, that oftentimes do come back later and buy and those types of things. And so there is some brand lift that occurs. And we just say that's the gravy, right? We don't want to be, that's not what we're positioning our value on. We're positioning our value on what we can track and the value that that's driving for the organization. And just like the name of your podcast, the rising tide raises all ships, right? When we've got effective marketing going on and what we can track as effective, it's still having influence outside of that as well that helps everything perform better.
Well, I mean, I think that's a nice place to do a plug here. So I see a lot of synergy. Disruptive Advertising needs to be a sponsor of Rising Tide Podcast, so we can talk about that later.
Sure.
Tell me the kind of your idea of one thing you mentioned a minute ago when we were talking about metrics. I mean, I think we tend to see metrics from an ROI standpoint. We tend to say, okay, what's working? But are you not just as concerned about what's not working? I mean, it's almost this like A/B testing and figuring out why people aren't clicking on these versus the fact that they are clicking on them, because you can have false clicks as well. You can have people clicking on things that just are, they're just click happy, or they want to go to follow links or whatever. But, figuring out, is it the color? Is it the headline that we're using? Is it the font? Is it the timing? I mean, all these things are you not concerned with both sides of that coin?
Absolutely. And I am a big believer, if we take one step back and then we'll jump back into that, businesses become their best selves when things aren't going great. That's when we learn how to be efficient. That's when we're scrappy. That's when we're hungry. That's when we figure out the creative solution that works. Well, it's actually the same with marketing. If we step back into that, and This is where I see most businesses fail from a marketing standpoint. They try something, it didn't drive the ROI that they wanted, therefore it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that say, yeah, Facebook doesn't work for my business or Google doesn't work for I'm like, okay, if you have a business model that you don't think you need a successful marketing strategy on Google and Facebook and Instagram with, you're high, because you have to figure out that's what has everyone's attention. That's where people are going
exactly
to find solutions.
Yep.
So there's a better way to do that. And to your point, you oftentimes learn more from what didn't work. And sometimes you learn from what did work.
Yep.
Because, hey, you thought the pain points that your customers cared about were X, Y, and Z. Well, guess what? We tested something different and it resonated way better with them.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden we're using our advertising as market research to say, okay, now we understand your audience better, the pain points that they care the most about, the benefits that they care the most about, the price points that resonate with them better. And guess what? We're getting that in real time while we're driving sales. And yeah, it's not quite as profitable as we want yet, but all that information of what didn't work, we're now compiling into the right buyer personas, audiences,
right.
Spend strategies, the way that we position your brand, your products, your services. And then all of a sudden you've built a moat around the business that the competition doesn't understand, because now they're saying, I spend money on Google or Facebook and Instagram and it doesn't drive the return that I'm looking for. And then we're behind the scenes laughing and saying, that's what disruptive advertising, that's where it comes from. Outsmart your competition, don't outspend them. So that a year, 2 years down the road, they're scratching their heads and saying, how in the heck do these guys spend money on these platforms? Because every time we do, we're losing money, right? Well, it's because we figured out everything that, did and didn't work. We put together, made things what they needed to be, increased lifetime value on the back end to make sure people that bought once are now buying twice, other things like that. And now all of a sudden, that's where the strategic and competitive edge comes from in the marketplace is we can spend money where our competition can't and make a return.
And show you in the metrics.
Exactly. And that's what we call like a hashtag winning, right?
Yeah,
like that's
exactly. And you don't have to sell your services that way. I mean, your services in essence sell themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure.
That's why we've grown very quickly. Because we're taking the approach of don't just believe us. Don't just say, generally speaking, are things working better in your business? Let us show you, and put your big boy or your big girl pants on, because it's not all peaches and roses as we figure it out together. Because we are going to find plenty of things that don't work, and that's valuable for you to understand for your business.
Exactly. I love the name of your company, Disruptive Advertising, because you hear the term disruption all the time. It's kind of one of these cliche catch terms. These hackneyed, these kind of zeitgeist terms that are being used all the time. But the one thing in a company that I work for, we've gone through a lot of transition, and they use the term disruption. But if you don't have the strategic outcome in mind that you want to achieve, then all you're really doing is breaking stuff. Disruption has to have a strategic plan and a strategic path. Otherwise, you literally are just breaking stuff, and it's carnage. It's not progress. At the end of this. So I can tell that when you work with clients that you really almost start with the end in mind. This is we are going to exponentially grow this, because the metrics are going to bear out what to do. They're going to tell us what to do as we walk along this path. It's not going to be guesswork. It's you're going to be able to see this. We may take a step back to take 2 steps forward, but you will be able to see this if you stay in the boat, for a little while. So
you got to, don't burn the ship. Stay in the boat. Don't burn it yet, because we're still in the boat, right? Don't burn it while we're in it. But that's where that's where I see most businesses that can't take that step forward, that are stuck where they are or slowly declining, is that they think that they have to see that ROI first. When a smart company and a smart marketer says, that's exactly what we're figuring out. Sometimes it takes 6 to 12 months to really figure that out. And the companies that can push through and push through that phase that it requires are the ones that win, the ones that my industry is interesting. There are so many companies that agency hop, and
Oh yeah.
if they don't get an ROI in the first 2 to 3 months, they cancel and try the next one, cancel and try the next one, and it's always everyone else's fault why their business isn't working.
Right.
Right. Where from my
Speed
standpoint, I'm
dating.
like, it's speed dating. This relationship has no depth to it. Now, that being said, there are a lot of solutions out there that aren't going to get people where they want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the challenges that we have in our industry is people have had a lot of bad experiences,
Right.
and that a lot of internal teams and agencies do just throw a bunch of crap up against the wall without the end in mind and without really tracking it very well. And that's the difference. The difference is I spent $50,000 and here's what I got for it. Here's what we learned. Here's what doesn't work. Here's what it did, versus we spent $50,000 and did the needle move for the business, but I can't give you any context as to what we actually learned from it.
Right.
That's the difference.
Yeah. We could do the same thing the next quarter and lose $50,000. And we really don't understand why we gained the first quarter and lost in the second quarter, because maybe the circumstances changed. So what have I not asked you about specifically related to your business that you think would really be kind of germane to our listeners? Any just really drilled down lessons learned in the last 5 years that, one or two, just pick out one or two that you said, man, I kind of wish I knew this in 2012 that I now know in 2019.
Yeah. Number one, there's absolutely a thing as bad revenue. I wish that I just had the courage to say no to more clients early on in the business that I knew had unrealistic expectations that, if you didn't hit it out of the park, it was, just these stressful situations that we would find ourselves in where you're spending all your time on a couple of high maintenance situations that are unlikely to result in the outcome that really needs to happen for them to be happy. And all that time that could have been spent in better situations. I would have done that differently. I would have said no and been more selective on our clients initially. I think that would have been better. The other thing that I've learned is that there is a fine balance of there needs to be process, there needs to be structure to any business for consistent and repeatable results that are sustainable. And you have to have some variety to how you're doing things as well. And for me, that balance has been interesting. And I am a little bit more of that, let's build the bridge as we're crossing, right? Like, let's go, let's figure it out, let's move. And that's my personality. And I attracted a lot of people like that initially in the business. I think that what I would have done, and and that's my person. We do random cash games like every Friday. It's like, hey, we're gonna flip a coin. You can win $100. Call it right. You know what I mean? Like just things that just keep things fresh and creative and fun. And so we do a lot of things like that. I think I would have probably spent more time on finding someone that was a lot more process minded a little bit earlier in the business.
It's gonna give you balance.
Create that consistency. Yeah. And we found that as we've grown, and then the balance of the two is what makes for a great culture. Because if you have too much of one or the other, it doesn't actually work very well. People don't want to feel like they're robots, right? And they just follow the protocol. And if it's just all winging it every day, then it's hard to repeat that and to be successful and grow. And so that's probably one of the other things I'd have done a little bit differently, was be a little bit more selective about the clients we work with and find someone that was a little more process minded earlier on.
But that process-minded person can't be the visionary.
No, I agree.
There has to be somebody standing in the front of the boat, pointing their arm to cross the Delaware. I mean, somebody that says, "This is the direction we're going. Your guys' job. It's you figure it out. You figure out how we can do it, how we can make it happen." So, I'm gonna take about a 90-degree turn here, and I was listening to an interview you had done. Probably in the last year or so on YouTube that you talked about this, you told this story, and I actually laughed when I heard it, and I probably laughed more of a nervous laugh than an actual laugh, because I tried to put myself in the position you were describing. I'm thinking I probably would have shot myself, in that process. But tell me this about the story about was it your senior year in college? you did
Oh man,
57 credit hours.
I don't want to go. I don't want to go back there. I still have nightmares about
I
that
mean,
year.
wow.
So let's see, it would have been. So I did 57 credit hours in 1 year of college. You need 120 credits to graduate. I did 57 in 1 year.
I was a junior by the end of my first year.
Okay, so you know about this.
No, I mean I didn't.
Oh, got it. Yeah. I worked full time. I was a scoutmaster for a youth group, and man, that was just
Married, had your first child.
Married, had our first child.
Oh wow.
And it was so stressful, and two things that made it. I didn't even mention, I got shingles that year. And shingles is a resurgence of the chicken pox that old people with weakened immune systems get.
Exactly.
Or really, really stressed college kids. Okay. And then I also was playing a game of ultimate frisbee after a scouting activity. Landed weird, broke my leg into like 10 pieces, and damaged all sorts of ligaments and tendons in my ankle. The week of finals, of all things. And, and I look back at that year and I wonder why I was in such a hurry. But one thing that again, I still have nightmares about that year. And it was one of the best learning experiences of my life as well. When I had that injury, I had our landlord. She was just a fantastic lady and called me and said, "Don't worry about rent this month."
Wow.
My employer called me and said, "Hey, we're still going to pay you even though you're not coming in. And we've set up a laptop for you to work from home when you're ready." I had some kid from my class that I didn't even know his last name showed up with notes from classes to help me be prepared for finals and what was going on. One of my teachers said, "Don't worry about it. It was my marketing actually class." And she's like, "We'll just give you an A. You're doing great." My family and friends and the people that were there to support me. I am such a prideful, I serve other people. I don't get served. I serve other people, what an awesome experience for me to like be humbled and to need help and to just realize and really appreciate the amount of great people in my life that were really there in a moment that I needed them. And so that was a great year. One that is still, again, I literally will have a nightmare that I forgot to go to a class all semester, that I broke a leg, that something crazy happened. But I look back and probably the best learning experience was, and it's okay for me to be served too,
How does the book A Tale of Two Cities start? It was the best of times and it was the worst of times.
Yeah.
Everything wrapped up in that 12-month period. I can't even imagine. I mean, I can just see a professor, you call him, I broke my leg in 10 places. Could you not just come up with the dog ate my homework? I mean, really, this is what you're going to do to get out of a final. So,
yeah.
I mean, wow, 10 places. Do you still have like residual, like issues with, I mean, you break something in 10 places. It's probably going to heal differently than it started.
Well, they put a plate on the bone to kind of hold it in place. I still have that plate in there with 10 screws in it, and doesn't set off the metal detector at the airport.
I was going to ask you that question.
Everyone wants to know that question. Doesn't set off the metal detector, but yeah, it still aches. Like if I play basketball or do something that's pretty jostling on your joints and your ankle, I can feel where that plate is because it removes some of the flexibility of the bone.
Oh, for sure.
So I can kind of feel where it's at. Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Well, Jacob, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I could talk to you all day because it's a space I love to talk about, and you have a very engaging manner as well. So it's just really good to take your time. I know your time is very valuable, but can you just wrap us up and just leave our listeners with, one or two, three things that if you could teach a little micro course on somebody that's just getting started in this business to really focus on when they're thinking about Facebook advertising or thinking about, just using social media in business and just getting started. What are two or three things that you would really advise someone early stage just to focus on?
Yeah, the number one mistake that I see people making is in the early stages, there's not a lot of marketing dollars, and I
Hmm.
understand that. And what too many businesses are doing is they're taking that really small amount and they're spreading it out.
Mm.
And they're spreading it out so thin that they're bidding on hundreds of keywords on Google.
Yeah.
They're targeting either really broad or too many audiences on Facebook or Instagram. And they've just spread it so thin that by the time they actually spend their first few grand in advertising, there's no statistical significance to anything that they learned
Mm.
because they spread their budget too thin. So then they spend their first 5 grand. It probably didn't work very well, and they have nothing to show for it at the end of it. When my recommendation is just keep it so incredibly simple. Start with an audience. Start with a couple keywords. Run your ads and see how those perform, right? So that you can actually get to the end of that and say, well, at least we know if this one worked or this one didn't.
Right.
And it's like you've said, start with the end in mind, and on a limited budget, on a shoestring budget earlier on, even if it's in an established business where you're starting a new product or a new service line or whatever that is, always set yourself up with the business question that you are going to answer when you're done running the campaign.
Hmm.
And make sure that you can get the information that you need to answer that question. I'm going to spend this budget. I'm going to see the question I'm going to ask is what benefit or what pain point in my ad copy drives the best engagement. And then I'm going to very narrow targeting, 2 or 3 ad variations. And at the end of that, I'm now going to understand what pain point or benefit best resonates with my audience. And now at least I've answered a question that gives me value, whether or not it returned a financial return on that initial test.
So how would they determine that if they're, I mean, we're talking really early stage. How would they determine the business question they're necessarily trying to answer at the end of the campaign? I mean, is that also a process? I mean, is it not just, I want a client, you know, that's the business question. I want people to sign to my course. I want people to, is it more specific than that? I mean, you need to drill down more than that.
It has to be, because on a limited budget, if you say the business question is, how do I get people to sign up? You spend a little bit of budget. It did or it didn't work. Now you're flipping a coin, but you don't understand why.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's why you have to be more specific with the question. And yeah, you're always going to measure if it got you what you needed from a business standpoint, but you've got to be more specific. And the questions, if I'm in a proven industry, I'm a plumber. I know people need plumbing services. Yeah, the question might be a little, can I bid on this keyword? Maybe that's okay, but I would still even argue that's still going too broad and asking the wrong question first. It's, you know, how do I position myself differently, and what thing gets them to click at a higher rate than the other? Or what do I put on my landing page that gets them to pick up the phone and call or fill out the form or to buy the product at a little higher rate, even if it's not profitable? Which one is engaging and getting that to work first? You got to have a specific question. And just getting a sale, can I get a sale? Like that's what basically everybody does. And then they get to the end of it and they can't give any explanation as to why or why not it didn't work.
Right. I mean, they could still be doing all the wrong things and make a sale.
That's exactly right.
You know, so that has really shown you nothing, you know, in the outcome of that test. So was there anything that I haven't touched on that you want to touch on just as we wrap up here, and just, you know, let people know how they can find you online?
Yeah, you know, I think at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, businesses come to us because they want help growing. And what we're known for is a really effective and smart advertising, Google and Facebook and Instagram. That's what people come to us for. They typically lack the bandwidth or expertise to do so themselves, and they engage us to help them figure that out. The best way to find us or have a conversation about it, we actually have a free audit software. So if you're already running some ads and you just want some perspective on how it's doing, we'll run an audit and give you a great deliverable that you can go and execute on yourself. Or if you want our help, we'd be glad to help and do that as well. But the best way is just reach out to us through our website at disruptiveadvertising.com.
Okay.
And we've got a fantastic team of strategists that are glad to chat with any business. Of every 100 that reach out to us, we're only a good fit for about 20 of those. And so we'll be the first one to tell you if we're the right fit or not to actually help. And in most of the time, we can just point people in the right direction on how to take it to the next step.
Right. What a nice problem to have, though. You have companies that are coming to you, and you're actually just, you're working with 20% of the companies that are actually reaching out to you. So obviously you're doing something right.
Yeah, I'd like to
or
think
a lot
so.
of things right. That's exactly right. Well, Jacob, it has been a true pleasure to have you on Rising Tide, and just thank you again for your time. I know you've got 119 people sitting on the backside of that camera waiting on you to lead them into the weekend. But as we come across people that might be a good fit, we'll certainly send them your way, and just try to do our part to help promote the services that you provide. And just thank you again for just taking your time and just helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Jacob, have a great day.
Thank you.